It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Malik Johnson decided to take a walk through his neighborhood. The weather was perfect, not too hot, not too cold. The streets were peaceful, and there was a calm in the air that made the world feel a little slower. Malik had been stressed lately with work and personal life, and he thought a short walk would help clear his head. He wasn't expecting what happened next. As he strolled down the sidewalk, his thoughts lost in the day's events, he noticed a police car slowly driving past. It was a black and white SUV, familiar and unremarkable, but it didn't pass him by. It stopped right in front of him, blocking the path ahead. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't done anything wrong, so he wondered why the police had stopped. The vehicle's engine hummed as the officer inside watched him intently. Malik stood there for a second, confused. He had been walking down the street like everyone else. What could they possibly want? Before he could make a move, the officer's door swung open. A woman stepped out. She was tall, with short, cropped hair, a stern but focused expression on her face. Officer Taylor? Malik knew her name from the neighborhood watch meetings. She had recently been promoted to patrol duty. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson," Officer Taylor said, her voice even but commanding. "Can you explain what you're doing here?" Malik blinked, taken aback. Just taking a walk, officer. Is there something wrong?" The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him carefully. The air seemed to get heavier with each passing second. Malik could feel the weight of her gaze. There was something in her eyes that made him uneasy, a suspicion, a judgment, something he couldn't put his finger on. "I've had reports of suspicious activity in this area," Officer Taylor said. "People of your description fitting a certain profile have been seen in this neighborhood lately." Malik's chest tightened. "Suspicious activity? I'm just walking. I live here. I have every right to be here." The officer didn't budge. "I'm sure you do, Mr. Johnson. But when there are complaints, we have to investigate." Malik tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm not involved in any crime. I just moved here a few months ago." "What exactly are you implying?" There was a brief silence, and Malik noticed the officer's eyes flick to his shirt, a plain black t-shirt and jeans, then to the backpack slung over his shoulder. It was as though she was scrutinizing every little detail, looking for something to justify the suspicion. It was a feeling Malik knew all too well. "Do you mind if I check your bag?" she asked, her tone more formal now. Malik felt a pang of frustration rise in him. "I don't think you have a right to search my bag without reason." Officer Taylor narrowed her eyes, her posture stiffening. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. I can detain you while I check." "Detain me for what?" Malik replied, his voice shaking slightly with a mix of anger and fear. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, she took a step closer, now only a few feet away from him. Malik felt trapped. His mind raced, his stomach tight with anxiety. How did this escalate so quickly? Then, unexpectedly, Officer Taylor's expression softened slightly. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice a little. "I'm not trying to make trouble. But I have a job to do, and people have been reporting strange activity. I just need to be sure." Malik stood still for a moment, trying to process what she was saying. He knew he wasn't breaking any laws, but he could sense the subtle pressure in her words, the way she was trying to get him to comply without directly forcing him. "Okay, I get it," he said, trying to remain calm. "But you need to understand, this doesn't feel right. You're profiling me. You're looking at me like I'm some sort of criminal." For a brief moment, Malik saw a flicker of recognition in Officer Taylor's eyes. She paused, taking a step back. There was a flash of something, guilt? Uncertainty? Malik couldn't tell, but it was enough to make him feel like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to reconsider her approach. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way," Officer Taylor said quietly. "I'm just doing my job. But I'll admit, sometimes things can get misinterpreted." Malik nodded slowly, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the moment. "Yeah, I know how that goes," he said, voice steadying. "And I get that you're doing your job. But I shouldn't have to feel like I'm a suspect just because of how I look." Officer Taylor nodded slowly, as if processing what he said. After a long, uncomfortable silence, she spoke again. "You're right. I shouldn't have assumed. I apologize." Malik blinked, surprised. This wasn't what he expected. "What? I apologize," Officer Taylor repeated, meeting his eyes with a level of sincerity he didn't expect. "I made an assumption based on a description, and I shouldn't have. I see now that I was wrong." For a moment, Malik didn't know how to respond. He had been bracing himself for a confrontation, for things to escalate further. But instead, the officer was admitting her mistake. "Thank you," Malik said, his voice softening. "I appreciate you saying that." The officer gave him a small, genuine smile. "We all make mistakes. But it's how we learn from them that matters." Malik gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "I hope this doesn't happen again." It won't, she promised. I'll be more careful in the future. As the officer turned and walked back to her car, Malik felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He wasn't sure if he had just witnessed something rare, or if it was just a fluke, a moment where an officer took accountability and truly listened. But he knew one thing for sure: it wasn't an encounter he would ever forget.